Evening. Welcome to all who are gathered here tonight, and welcome to everyone who's joining us online. I'm Jerry Cruz, and tonight I'll be performing the duties of presiding co-chair of the Massey Commission meeting. I also want to recognize my fellow co-chairs who've been instrumental in leading the commission, Joanne Johnson, who's here, uh, Shadia Massey, who's not here this evening. But I do want to recognize that Sonia's mother, Donna, is here. Donna's in the front row over there. Welcome. We're glad to have you tonight. Also, we'll have time for public comments again tonight toward the end of the meeting. Anybody who would like to speak may sign up at the desk over there, and Megan will get you signed in and ready to go. We do have a quorum of our members present. The December Massey Commission meeting is now called to order. We'll first do the approval of the minutes. I think you've all had the opportunity to review the minutes from November 18th. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve? Motion by Kristen Rubelke. Is there a second? Second by Susan Phillips. All in favor, aye. Motion, all opposed, nay. Motion is approved. Now we'll move to work group reports and comments. I'll ask each commissioner who serves as a work group leader to present a 2 to 3 minute verbal report on the recent meetings of the work group. First, Sunshine Clemens from the Law Enforcement Hiring, Training, Wellness, and Cultural Competence Work Group.
Thank you. Our law enforcement group met on December the 2nd, and we discussed refining our focus into 3 areas, which would be the candidate selection process, alternative programs to policing, and officer wellness. We also reviewed proposals regarding including the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, as part of the background process, reviewing of social media platforms, and reviewing of any civil legal proceedings for potential officers, and prohibitions on hiring candidates with certain criminal convictions, and increasing the involvement of the Deputy Merit Commission in the hiring process, as well as creating specific disqualifiers and level of discretion on those disqualifiers as potential fireable offenses after the officers are hired. And lastly, we discussed alternatives to policing, such as policing response to mental health interventions versus focusing on improving police trainings. And our next meeting is January the 6th at 5:30 at CAP 1908, which is located at 1100 South Grand East.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, Brian Wojcicki, Integrated Mental Health Services and Emergency Response.
So at our last meeting, we started to set up what I'm hoping we can replicate in future meetings, where we discuss questions to present to an expert or guest who will then be at our following meeting. And the 2 topics that we will have guests on, at least one of the 2, will be the mental health co-responder program that's been started at the city level and with the police department, and crisis intervention training for law enforcement. The discussion involved questions to submit to SPD ahead of time, as well as formatting it and sending things along to the county level as well for anything that, even if it's not quote unquote exactly that program, something in that realm. If there's a policy, we're going to be submitting those questions to the county. And then the final topic was the Justice Collaboratory, the Yale Law students, some foundational questions that they could maybe help with. It's kind of a 2-part question, at least at this point, was best practices that other entities, local government entities, have come up with over the last 5 years, in particular for mental health, and what actually probably may be the more important question that the work group wanted to highlight the Justice Collaboratory in responding to is, of those top 6 that are common recommendations from the groups, why or what has gotten in the way of their implementation, if at all. and anything that has been seen with that. So that was our meeting.
Okay, thanks. Any questions for Brian? Next, Kristen Rubelke, Community Education, Public Health and Safety.
On Saturday, December 7th at 2 p.m., the Community Education on Public Health and Safety Work Group met at the CAP building to continue refining our role and focus. The group, like many of the work groups, have a variety of valid ideas and concerns regarding police reform. And many of these ideas could be fit in our work group, but also could fit into other work groups as well. So one thing that we did is we as a group wrote down all of these concerns and then placed them in the appropriate work group. So that is something that you will all be receiving, some organized recommendations and areas of focus from our work group, just so that you're aware of some of the ideas of our members. The work group also made its own list of ideas, and with the help of Kind Consulting, organized its list by categories. These categories helped us to determine 4 different areas of focus, and these areas include accountability in 911 services, accountability gaps in evaluation and historical trends, a Know Your Rights campaign, and mental health and trauma in the community. The work group was given hold dates for future work group meetings and showed no issue with the dates given. So all hold dates are currently scheduled for the last Saturday of the month at 2 p.m. and we plan on holding them at the CAP building. May is an exception and will be held on a different Saturday during that month. The next work group meeting will be held on Saturday, January 25th at 2 p.m.
Thank you. Next, Veronica Espina, Economic Disparities and Service Availability.
So our group met the 2nd of December, and we refined the areas in which we're going to focus to later provide policy recommendations. And before I go there, I just want to say we have also 2 new members in our group, and those are Brianna Roberts and Beth Langen, who are serving at our group. So the focus of the areas of focus for policy recommendations are healthcare, residential segregation, including housing and transportation, education and employment, banking, lending, and grant funding, and service accessibility. We have very good discussions about these issues with our work group members. They're very invested in making policy recommendations. So we have been very successful inviting our experts. We have 2 experts coming to the January 6th meeting. One is Dr. Lisa Johnson, who's going to talk about segregation in Springfield, residential segregation, education, and so on, grant funding. And we have an expert that is going to talk about transportation and accessibility. That would be for the January 6th meeting. And we have another meeting in February where we are going to talk about the Community Reinvestment Act, and we will have another expert on, I think is employment. So we are meeting the first Monday of every month at 6 p.m. at 1 in a million. So our next meeting is January 6th at 6 p.m.
Okay, thanks for all those reports and all the great work that the work groups are doing. I've got a few remarks myself and some updates. Since we last met, there have been some surprising turn of events in the case against Sean Grayson. We're glad to hear of last week's ruling by the Illinois Supreme Court. The Supreme Court entered an order Tuesday staying the release of former Sangamon County Sheriff's deputy charged with the murder of Sonia Massey on July 6th. This stay will remain in effect until the Supreme Court takes up or denies the state's petition for leave to appeal. That means that Grayson will remain detained for now. There might be more legal surprises as the community seeks justice for Sonia. The Massey Commission will not be in a position to comment on all of them. But concerning this last turn of events, announced to a grieving family the day before Thanksgiving, we can make a clear statement. We stand with the Massey family and the state's attorney's office in efforts to keep Sean Grayson detained, and we're happy to hear that the Supreme Court has taken some action. My second update is regarding county board actions on resolutions sent by the Massey Commission at our last meeting. In our last meeting, we took meaningful action on 2 items. One, we strongly recommended that the Sangamon County Board take swift action to move toward the creation of a mental health board in Sangamon County. Number 2, we also strongly recommended that the Sangamon County Board take swift action that would give voters the power to recall a Sangamon County sheriff. Both issues now await action by the Sangamon County Board. Regarding the recall issue, our recommendation and Mr. Canman's resolution is facing some resistance. The measure did not pass a committee vote last week. There is still more time for positive action to be taken by the Sangamon County Board, and we urge the board members to take that action that the commission strongly recommended to them at our last meeting. Regarding the establishment of a mental health board, we're still waiting for a response about the status of that proposal and a timeline for action. While I don't have a timeline for action specifically, it certainly appears that there is broad support to advance this resolution. In order to build community trust, the county must be responsive to what the community is pleading for through the Massey Commission structure. If the county doesn't take appropriate action on our recommendations, I'll be very disappointed, and I know the commissioners share that sentiment too. Now I have an update on a couple of commission work group membership items. Since the first meeting of the commission in October, we've had a few changes in the member roles. For the commission, we recognize Harvey Hall. Many of you know the work that Mr. Hall does as one of our community's advocates for homeless veterans. His commitments have kept him from being able to fully participate with us, and we certainly understand that. While Mr. Hall will no longer be a member on our rolls, we acknowledge that he's always hard at work for the community and wish him well in his endeavors. We've had some changes on our work groups. You've already heard about one of them. In your packet, you'll find an updated list of members for each of those groups. The notable new additions include, as Veronica said, Brianna Roberts and Beth Langen on the Economic Disparities and Service Accessibility Work Group. For my last update, I have a comment about our commitment to anti-racism. In our first meeting, all commissioners received an introduction to the language of anti-racism. The commissioners will continue this anti-racism education and training as we uphold a key aspect of the mission of this commission. We've received 2 proposals for training forums and facilitation of this training. Our intent is to move forward with this and use one or both of those formats for all commissioners and work group participants. So commissioners, you will receive more information soon about the timing, structure, training, contracts under consideration for a winter engagement. So those are my remarks. Now we have a presentation coming up tonight. It's now time for the presentation from Sangamon County Sheriff Paula Crouch. Before she begins, I'll highlight a few points in her biography. Paula Crouch serves as Sheriff of Sangamon County, having been appointed and confirmed in 2024. A lifelong resident of Sangamon County, she brings nearly 30 years of public service experience focused on community safety and justice. Her career began as a Sangamon County 911 dispatcher before she joined the Springfield Police Department in 1999. Rising to the rank of lieutenant, she retired in 2023 after 24 years of service. During her law enforcement career, Crouch was a member of the Critical Incident Team, CIT, specializing in responding to individuals in mental health crises with empathy and service. These are just a few of the many ways that she has served throughout her career. As sheriff, uh, Sheriff Crouch has stated that she is committed to advancing public safety, fostering trust between law enforcement and the community, and implementing forward-thinking approaches to law enforcement. Co-Chair Johnson and I had a very good meeting with Sheriff Crouch a few weeks ago. So Sheriff Crouch, please proceed with your presentation and remarks.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight, to be able to meet with you and talk to you about some of the changes that are happening at the Sheriff's Office. So I did prepare a little PowerPoint just kind of to use as a guide. I will try and not read directly from the PowerPoint all night long to bore you too much, but I want to try and stay on track and make sure that I cover the important things, or what I think are the important things, especially some of the changes. So I may skip a little bit and skip around, but as I think someone said, I'm going to stick around for some questions afterwards. So if I miss something, I'll be happy to try and address it for you at the conclusion. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was really just the qualifications to become a deputy. They must be at least 20 years of age at the time of the application, possess a high school diploma or equivalent, be able to obtain a valid driver's license. They must agree to a background investigation, a psychological assessment, to a medical examination. They must be able to obtain or have a firearm owner's identification card. They must have no felony convictions and must reside within Sangamon County within 6 months of employment. And this is just our hiring flow chart as it is right now. The steps that we go through before hiring. The application is submitted and received, and then it's reviewed. The review of the application is simply to make sure that they meet the basic requirements that are required by law to be a police officer. Then they're sent a practice test and a study guide, and they are allowed as much time as they need to look over that study guide and that practice test. When they're ready for us to send them a link to the actual test, they'll email us, and then we send a link to a written test that they take online. It's through Standard and Associates that they've created. It's a timed response test so that they can try and ensure that there's fairness and no cheating, things like that on the written test. Once those results come back, then we'll schedule them for our physical agility test. We run them through the same physical agility test that is required by the state to go through the police academy. If they pass both of those, then we are currently taking those to the Merit Commission. The Merit Commission automatically gets a copy of the written test scores. So they already have those, but at the Merit Commission meeting, then what they're doing currently is that they will review those test scores and they will tell us if it's okay for us to move ahead in the background process, or if they consider that written test a failure and that we should not proceed with the background on that candidate. Once we have that okay to go ahead with the background process, then we're conducting interviews. And that interview currently consists of a panel of myself, 2 of my staff members, and then a civilian. So we have a preset list of questions that we ask the same of every candidate, and then kind of judge their response on that that oral test. Once that's completed, the investigators are working on the background investigation. Then we have a psychological exam. Currently, we send all of our applicants that are in line to get hired to Dr. Campion for a psychological exam. If they pass that exam, and they have their background completed, then we are taking it to the Merit Commission a second time, and we're having the Merit Commission actually review the background packet and the psychological exam, and then they will vote if they believe that person's background is a pass, and we can offer them conditions of employment at that point. And the final thing is, if they've got that pass and they're eligible for hire, then we'll send them to a medical exam, and then they'll be placed on our eligibility list for hire. This is just the link that shows how they can access to get that written test that I've talked about. I kind of talked a lot in that first slide, but this just is the step-by-step on the application process. I know I'm flipping really quick, but I really did say everything on there. So we're at the personal history questionnaire. This is a document that was created. It's about 34, 35 pages, and it covers, so at the point that we give, the person has passed their test, we'll give them this personal history questionnaire for them to complete, to turn into us so that our investigators can start their background process. And some of the items that are asked for in this personal history questionnaire, again, this is what they are providing to us, is just their basic information and contact, their social media information, residential history section, citizenship information, family information, education section, military service section, employment information, financial information, vehicle information, a criminal history section, a reference section, and drug and alcohol use section. So all of that information becomes important for us to have them self-report that to us. What we do is that we will look at all that information, and then as the investigators start their background check, they'll review the information that the applicant has provided based on the information that they find from different resources that we have to compare if the applicant is being truthful and reporting accurate information to us, or if they're being deceptive and leaving important information off or trying to put us in a different direction with that information. So another thing that was created was a background investigation manual. And I am going to read this word for word because this is one of the very first paragraphs in the manual. It says the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office must conduct a comprehensive background investigation of each applicant to ensure the subject meets the requirement for employment as a law enforcement officer. The objective of the background investigator is to find sufficient information so the sheriff, merit commission, chief deputy, and others can judge the candidate's character, integrity, and past conduct. A background investigator must conduct a thorough investigation into the applicant's reputation, integrity, honesty, dependability, qualifications, experience, associations, emotional stability, and respect for the law. The section in the background investigation manual is the vital records and criminal history search. This is where we will use our computer databases to search someone's criminal history. We'll check to make sure they have that FOID card. We run, we have fingerprints done at the jail that we send to the FBI and the state police for record tracking. If the subject has lived in another jurisdiction or they went to school in another jurisdiction, then we will send letters to each of those jurisdictions, circuit clerk, state's attorney's office, and police department, and ask them for any records that are relevant to that person or that address where the person has lived. We send that request, a written request, and then we attach a waiver that the applicant has signed giving permission for these entities to give us that information. And then it says on there, obtain a clear or similar report. That's another database that we have that when we run a person's name and social security number, birth date, it gives us a whole variety of information, credit information, address history, relatives. So it's a comprehensive kind of report. It's the stuff we hear about when people are selling your information and doing the data to different sources. So that's what we use to get that extra information there. We will check the military records if the person reports that they've been in the military. And if the applicant currently or has been previously employed by a government body, a formal FOIA request for the personnel file of the applicant should be sent to that government agency. And I put an asterisk there because I want to elaborate a little bit on that. Currently, and I think we get into this a little bit further down, but what I'm having the investigators do is if an applicant has worked at a previous law enforcement agency of some sort, then my investigators have to go to that agency in person with the waiver that the applicant has signed to review those personnel files or any records that they may have. That also gives the investigator the opportunity not only to look at those records, but they can talk to the chief or the sheriff, the warden of the jail, whoever it happens to be, as well as then a direct supervisor. Because oftentimes it's not always the same. The direct supervisor may be someone that's worked closely with that applicant, and they may not be quite as open with information as the actual chief or sheriff would be. In addition, if that direct supervisor hasn't worked with that person their entire career, then perhaps they may not know things that have happened in the far past. So going in person ensures us that we can actually get our eyes on those files, if you will. And I believe we actually will get more information by going in person than we will with a FOIA request. However, the FOIA request is just a piece of paper as far as for work for us. So I've had no problem with us duplicating that. And so since we've been doing background since I've been there, we're doing both of those. I will say we've only had the opportunity to really do a couple of backgrounds, and with those we haven't got any new information returned from our FOIA requests, but they have been sent out there. Okay, so once that applicant turns in their background packet of information, then the investigator has to call that person back in to the station, and we'll sit down with them and we'll go over the personal history questionnaire page by page with them to confirm the information that they've put on there is the accurate information, that they haven't left out anything, that we're not reading something wrong, just to make sure that we do have the exact information that they intended to put on that paper and that they didn't leave anything out. We'll tell them at that point that if they have contact with any law enforcement, before we reach back out to them again, that they should notify that investigator so that we can update that information during the background process. Okay, the next thing up there should be source interviews. So on the source interviews, the person is allowed, the investigator is allowed to call those sources on the phone to do phone interviews, but they should only be conducted in instances where the person being interviewed is difficult to schedule due to factors such as their physical location. We'll do interviews of parents and siblings, interview any partner that the subject is dating or currently resides with. We will interview their spouses, former spouses or former exes if we have that information. And we'll, I think I said that already, conduct interview with any other adult the subject currently resides with. On our personal history questionnaire and the application, we do ask them to list references or sources. So the investigator is to contact those provided references and sources, but then they have the responsibility of developing what we list as the developed sources as well. So they have to find some people to talk to that the applicant doesn't just provide their names and their contact for. About that? Former employers interview the subject's current employer or supervisors in person. All former employers for the candidate should be contacted if possible. Interviews with former employers or supervisors may be conducted by telephone if necessary. Certain former residences, if they don't own their residence, we are to talk to their landlord. If the subject's landlord, interview the subject's prior landlords for residences the subject has lived in the past 5 years, and conduct in-person interview with at least 2 neighbors at the subject's current residence. And if they've only lived there less than 2 years, then we go back to residences. Social media, we actually generally check their social media before we even give them the background packet, or we check to see what we find before we give them the background packet. Oftentimes, once they fill out, I'm calling it a background packet, I'm sorry, it's the personal history questionnaire. That's the same document. Once they fill out that personal history questionnaire and they see that we're asking about their social media, a lot of times what happens is their social media will get shut down. So then we're unable to actually see what they may have been posting or commenting on, types of groups and stuff. So we usually check that before we even ask them, and then try and cross-check or confirm with the information that they provide in their packet as far as their different names or handles, if you will, on the different social media sites. If we find something that the investigator thinks is derogatory, that will be documented in their summary. And if possible, they'll try and screenshot it or make a copy so that the Merit Commission will have the opportunity to see exactly what was posted that the investigator believed to be offensive or inappropriate. Okay, subjects with prior law enforcement, I've talked about a lot of this, but I'll go over it again. Submit a FOIA request to the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board, requesting the subject's training history. Speak with the subject regarding prior law enforcement employment and any prior discipline record during our initial interview. Determine the subject is currently under any investigation for any discipline or criminal investigation, and contact prior police agencies and request personnel records and internal affairs records. If the records cannot be provided, go to the police agency in person to review the personnel file and internal affairs file. We're going to go to the current police department if they're currently working there regardless. But if, say, it's someone that's had 4 or 5, we could try and call if they are willing to provide the information to us. If not, then we'll make visits out there in person. And with this, we're not taking this lightly. We actually just did a background on not someone that's a police officer, but someone that was working at a police office they called it a police recruit. So they haven't been to the academy yet, but they were kind of in training to be a police officer. But it was in Kentucky, and I sent my investigators to Kentucky to meet in person with the agency down there. So after the investigator believes that they've gotten all the information back that they're going to get back from the different agencies that we've requested from, they've been out to the neighbors, the employers, they've talked to family members, they've talked to references, then they'll review the information that they obtained, again, to the information provided in the personal history questionnaire, and they'll call the applicant back in for like a final interview. And that final interview will go over any discrepancies and see if they have any excuse or any reason why something was maybe left off of their personal history questionnaire, or if they have an explanation for some information that we found on there. The final evaluation and narrative. The investigator will complete a written summary of the background investigation for review by the sheriff, chief deputy, merit commission, and any other designee. The written summary should be organized and contain a summary of all sources interviewed during the investigation. The summary should include notation of any criminal arrest, prosecutions, civil judgments, orders of protection, or negative police contact. For subjects with prior law enforcement experience, document the date and time of the interview went to the date and time the interviewer went to the prior employing agency, and detailed explanation of any internal affairs complaints. And then the narrative should detail the discrepancy interview. And then our psychological exam, medical, and drug testing. All applicants will be required to take a psychological exam, and they're required to pass a medical or drug testing exam before hire. Once the applicant's background investigation, once the applicant's background investigation has been completed and they have taken a psychological examination, the information will be presented to the Merit Commission for review. The commission will have the opportunity to review all provided information, ask additional or clarifying questions, and vote to certify or pass the applicant for placement on the merit list. And at this time is when the applicant would be eligible for hire. So that kind of completes my actual presentation. I didn't make copies for everybody, but I do have a copy of, this is the personal history questionnaire that they complete. So you can see it's pretty lengthy. So we have all the applicants complete that. What we did is we created a background investigation summary. So this list has kind of a step-by-step process that the investigator, any investigator picking this or doing a background should be able to utilize this packet with these directions and be able to complete a thorough background investigation on any applicant, because there's step-by-step detailed directions on how to do that. And this packet even goes as far as there's a form with standard questions for each employer that they ask, and then the ability to ask additional based on responses from the employer. Same thing for neighbors, same thing for references. So it's kind of a flow sheet, if you will, so that they don't miss any of their steps and that they have a little guideline on what to do there.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for the presentation. Thanks for being here. I'll now open the floor to questions from the commissioners. So I'll acknowledge you if you just, Jerry? Yeah.
I have a couple. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I tried to push the button to turn it on, so it shows you where my head's at. Thanks. Appreciate you being here.
Welcome.
I have a couple of questions. One in regarding the in the hiring process, one outside of that scope, the one within. Sangamon County has had a reputation, whether it's deserved or not, for years for political hires. Have you addressed that? I know nepotism, but it's been around for a long time, and I'm not saying they don't end up with some good individuals at times.
So the changes that I make, I'll tell you first, there's been one person that I've offered employment to since taking this role. As far as I'm aware, he's not related to anybody. He doesn't know anybody. He's 22. He's never been a police officer anywhere except he's the gentleman from Kentucky. So he was a recruit training to be a police officer down there, but he will not be treated as a lateral. He'll be a traditional hire. And he went through this process that I've described today. We went through this process with placing him on the merit list and offering employment. He hasn't started yet, but we have offered him employment there. So as far as addressing your question, I'm hoping by giving the Merit Commission the responsibility of approving or not approving, that helps start to address some of the concerns. They'll be the ones voting on if the person makes it to actually to the merit list or not.
All right, thank you. And then lastly, this is outside of the hiring scope itself, but within the in-service records, the in-service training that personnel have taken there, have you had a chance to review any of that? And if so, have they consistently gone, or have you find where they're not making it or can't make it?
So,
I'll stop there.
yep. So what I've reviewed a couple things. First, I know that every deputy has met the mandates, the state mandates. That's accessible for me through the iLet's training portal, so I can see if someone's missing something. And there was a group of us that just had to take one of the mandates, but it had just come due, so it showed we were past due on it, and that's been completed. So I know that we're up on all our mandates. The other thing that I researched was CIT training to see how many had been to the actual 40-hour CIT training, and that was slightly under half of the deputies had been there. Again, that's not a mandatory training, but I was curious how many had actually received the CIT training, so I did research that part of it. And then we just completed a de-escalation training in December, an in-service training that included de-escalation. And then we have, I think, 10 people currently signed up to go. I know you're not asking this, but we're on this topic, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you. Go to Decatur to the PERF training, this ICAT training, which is a very good training, train the trainer training. So in January and February, there's approximately 10 of the deputies that are signed up to go there so that we can bring that back and train the rest of the department and hopefully some of our smaller county community partners too.
Thank you.
Joanne, and then Sunshine after.
Did you say IT training?
So there's CIT, the critical incident team training. And then the other one in Decatur is called ICAT, ICAT, ICAT training.
Good.
It's the integrated critical something tactics. I'd have to look it up and tell you for sure what the abbreviation stands for on it.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. The first,
Joanne, you want to use the microphone there?
Yeah. The first one, hello, yes. About the background investigation manual,
Yes.
is that a new implementation, the manual itself?
So yes.
Okay. And then does this mean, based on what the italicized statement was that you read from the beginning of that, does that mean that the Merit Commission is going to be consistently involved in the hiring processes throughout the process, from beginning at various stages, but from beginning to end?
Yes, so how I've described is what, and I have met with the Merit Commission and I've told them that is my wish. This is how I want our program to go. This is how I want our hiring practices. I want them to have the voice on passing or not passing someone on their background. So that will be put into our Merit Commission rules. We just haven't finalized them because we're waiting for additional recommendations from the commission.
Okay, thank you. And then another question is, the background investigators that are conducting the backgrounds,
Yes.
are they all Sangamon County Sheriff Office trained investigators?
So currently, yes.
Okay.
The one exception is there is a lieutenant from the jail who's an employee of the jail who assists with the backgrounds, primarily with some jail employees.
Okay.
But they work with the other investigators that are doing the backgrounds, yes.
Okay, and so what I'm trying to get at, Sheriff, is that the people that are conducting the investigations know how to conduct a thorough investigation, and that those summaries or reports, background packets, if you will, are going to be funneled up through a supervisor or a trained investigator who can maybe point to oh, but did you ask this? Or maybe you should go back and ask that type of thing.
So currently, the people doing the background investigation have investigative training. They were in the Detective Bureau, and that is my intent. My intent is to only have people with investigative experience do the background.
Okay. And then my last question is regarding training. Do you currently, are the deputies currently taking any bias training, anti-bias training, or cultural competency training? And if so, because it's mandated, you know that. And if so, is it online or in person?
So primarily, obviously, the mandates. It's probably a split. Some of them will do online training. Some of them will put in, if a training comes through the MTU, they will put in to go to that training. My understanding is that they've not ever been forced to go to the training per se if they've gotten it online. And when I say that, that sounds funny. I don't mean it the way it sounds. Generally, you see a class that comes up that's an in-person training and it interests you, so you can put in a school app to go to this training. So if someone saw this in-person training that they were interested in, they could put in a school app. If they're approved, they can go to that in-person training. If it comes to the point where like, hey, you've got this mandated training, they may do it online. So it's an either or, but we generally don't look at the MTU training. And unfortunately, that comes around once, every few months, and you can only send so many people at a time. So we don't always mandate all of that training in person.
So with this particular type of training, are you at all concerned that the curriculum's not consistent across the entire department? Like if some officers are going online versus some are catching the MTU offerings?
Right. So each class, if it's a different class but meets the same mandate, if you will, it could have a different focus, but still meet a mandate for the implicit bias. So it wouldn't necessarily be that everybody has had the exact same training, just that they've met that mandate for that training. So some of the ways to combat that would be certain training, such as you're speaking of, is to be able to incorporate that into our in-service training, because the in-service training, everyone would get the same training. So you would know your entire department has had the same training on a topic.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
I will add to you that I'm not a fan of online training. So I have been encouraging more school apps to come through where we can. And the county has not, when I say the county board has not had any trouble with the paying for the training that I'm approving for the deputies, even though it's in-person training compared to online training.
I'm sorry, I have one more thing that you just made me think about, and then I'm done. Does the county have a policy on prohibition of bias policing currently?
Do they have a policy on the prohibition? Yes.
Okay.
What?
Yes.
Policy on what?
The prohibition of bias, so an anti-bias policing policy.
Okay. So Sunshine, then Veronica, then Bob, and then Calvin.
I just have one. I think most of my questions have been answered already. I'm not quite sure how this works, so I'm just trying to make sure that it's captured in the FOIA. But like if an officer has been on put on the Brady list, I know like that's usually overseen by like the county, like the state's attorney's office. Would that if you're doing a FOIA and you're sending it to the department, the police department that they worked in, I don't know if that would be in there or if it would a FOIA request would also have to go to the state's attorney. But can you just walk me through how it's whether that would be included, and if not, how you would find that information? Because I know that there's like a statewide list, but I know that the county state's attorneys aren't required to report to that list. So I'm just trying to make sure that things aren't slipping through the cracks that way.
So we've actually discussed this. I'm not sure that I can give you a for sure answer. We have seen some agencies that create an entire form of its own that specifically asks that question, is this person on a Brady list for your department? And I asked that question of my own department when I came in. I said, do we have anyone that's listed on the Brady list? And I was told no. But I'm not sure where that list is kept, if that makes sense to you. That may not be the answer you want, but I'm just being honest.
That's okay. We can dig into that a little more later. Thank you for
Okay.
that.
All right.
Oh, wait, one more thing. Can an officer come off of the Brady list? Is that possible? Or is it once they're on there, they're always on there?
I believe once they're on there, they're always on there, but I
Okay.
am not 100% sure on that either. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay.
I don't know,
That's okay.
but
That's
I,
okay.
I don't think
These
you
are
can come off of that.
okay. Another thing to dig into. Thank you.
The Brady list is basically if an officer is found to have been untruthful, lied in court, lied on a police report, then a judge or the state's attorney can put them on a Brady list. Basically, it kind of prohibits, or it doesn't prohibit them from testifying, but they have to. If they testify in court, it has to be told to during the trial or the hearing that they have been on the Brady list.
Veronica?
So one of the things that we as commissioners have been looking at is the issue of systemic racism and how it affects different institutions, including sheriffs, police departments, law enforcement. And one of the fundamentals of anti-racism work is to think in both and instead of either or. And I think that if you have anti-bias training, you do need to have anti-racism training, because when you state that, for example, investigators will look into social media from a potential candidate and they can see if something is derogatory, and how do you make that decision without having the anti-racism training in which you learn from persons of color about the praxis and the policies that affect our institutions, right? We do have those experts in the city. And I think it's time, just like we have the Springfield Coalition on Dismantling Racism that has trained the Springfield Police Department for years, maybe 10 years ago was the last training we had. I think the Sheriff's Department is due and has been due for an anti-racism training. What is your commitment to do that for your employees?
I'm definitely interested in information from you. If there's training that we can bring to the sheriff's office that will help build the trust of the community, then I have no problem making that happen.
Yeah, I think that there are several of our organizations from which we come that have had such training and can make those recommendations.
Okay, great. I appreciate that.
Bob?
I have a couple of quick questions. I have a couple of quick questions on page 7, where you're saying if they've been employed by a government body, a formal FOIA request is made, and then you said something about a signed waiver. So that the applicant has to sign a waiver to permit you to get that information.
Not on the FOIA.
Okay.
If they sign the waiver, then we basically, it gives the entity that we're going to permission to show us everything. Whereas if we send a FOIA to that agency, it's going to be redacted.
Okay. And so my question is, if they don't sign the waiver, does that disqualify them?
If they don't sign the waiver, we can't complete the background. So we wouldn't proceed
So
on.
they're disqualified.
Right.
Okay. And then there was just something I didn't quite understand on the last page. A final evaluation and narrative. The narrative should detail the discrepancy interview. I don't understand that.
What I intended on that is that in the narrative, if there was a discrepancy found from the information, so here's what we get a lot of time. It'll be better to give you an example. Someone will list that they had 2 speeding tickets. Well, then when we pull the circuit clerk records, we'll find that they had 5 speeding tickets. So when we meet with them, we'll interview them. We'll say, okay, you reported this. We found 5. Why didn't you report this other 3? So that narrative should give what their explanation to the investigator is why they didn't include it. Most of the time they got supervision, so they thought it disappeared.
So in this case, discrepancy is a modifier. So it's that type of interview?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yep.
And then just above that, just FYI, in the blue sign there, follow-up interview with suspect. I just
Oh,
thought,
shouldn't say suspect, should it?
interesting. Okay. And then a final general question, just a general estimate, how much of this process is new since you took over?
So I could say that's a good question. When I took over, I asked, tell me what you're doing on backgrounds. Tell me how you're doing backgrounds. And I was given a sheet of paper. Some of you may have seen this in the past. It was about 3/4 down and it had bullet points. I do believe that the majority of what is in our packet or our manual were those bullet points. It just didn't really give direction on how to go about doing a lot of those things, if that makes sense. So there was a checklist kind of that said, check all past employers, but it didn't specifically say go in person, check the personnel files, have them sign this waiver. So I think the processes were there. I think it just wasn't clearly explained or followed through, maybe, I'm not sure. But so there was a lot of it. It just wasn't as clear as what, I mean, to me, this should be pretty clear. This is what the sheriff wants you to do. You know, I'll give you this, I'll give you this, I'll give you this. If you don't do something, you better have a good reason why it hasn't been done, because I've pretty much given you a workbook to fill out for each background.
So the process was there, but just not very well delineated.
I believe so.
Calvin, and then Susan.
Is Travis Coaster still one of your deputies?
He is.
Okay, Travis Coaster is actually on the Brady list. I have a copy of the Brady list, which was created under Dan Wright and Derek Dion. Dan Wright became a judge, I believe, earlier this January. The Brady list is usually under the state's attorney of that county. The Brady list, which looks like it hasn't been updated in some time since Dan Wright, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 individuals from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 police departments. So something that I would, as a if I was in a subcommittee, would look at is maybe even making the recommendation that State's Attorney John Milheiser also updates the list, keeps the list as well, because I am told that he does not create a list because he doesn't want it to be foilable. There is an internal policy that they have amongst the state's attorneys as well as assistant state's attorneys that they keep that to themselves to keep it from FOIA. So I just want to just point that out. But Travis he is confirmed to be on the Brady list.
If you can tell me, is that posted somewhere or you just had access to it?
I received this from the Sangamon County State's Attorney's Office, the FOIA officer, Joel Benoit.
Okay, and how recently?
I can actually tell you.
And I'm sorry to ask you, but I just asked this week.
It's okay. I received this August 12th of 2024.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
One. Also another question, and sorry, I have a lot of notes here too. So, under the qualifications to become a deputy, I understand that you're here talking about changes to the hiring process, but we also need to make changes to the retaining process. So, on the first page, it says must possess or be able to obtain a valid firearms, a FOIA card, a fire owner's identification card. In the state of Illinois, if your FOIA card is suspended or whatnot, a police officer, as long as they're on duty, they can still be able to carry their firearm while they're on duty. But I think that something that should be changed with this is that they also must retain the FOIA card during the entirety of their employment. Recently, there was a former Springfield police officer, and this is why this is so fresh to me. It was a Springfield police officer who had got into it, I believe, with an ex-girlfriend. A situation occurred, and his firearms was suspended, but he was still on routine on patrol. The police department did not know that his FOIA card was suspended while he's out there interacting with the public with a firearm. And then I think about 10 months after his FOIA card was taken away, he was charged in Sangamon County after they issued a search warrant at his house and they found drugs, testosterone, and money, weed, and things like that. But the problem that I have with that is, why did the police agency not know that? So what I would also suggest is maybe also including routine FOIA card searches through leads and make sure that their FOIA card is active. That is one.
Calvin, are you finished? Did you have
No, I'm sorry. I got a couple of more.
do you want to go now or you want to wait? Are you ready?
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So I know we're talking about the hiring process, but I also want to talk about changes with the retaining. I know you were becoming, or you had already became a sheriff for 4 days when it was another officer involved death, Curtis Davenport. So this involved a burglary. The deputies did not find him until 2 hours, and they stated that they had just, it looked like the vehicle had matched the description. They then followed the vehicle all the way out of town. I'm sorry, 3 counties. I know each department has a pursuit policy. ISP, they told their troopers on scene, do not engage at all. So, and I know that we've spoken in regards to this. Have you taken a look at the pursuit policy, as well as in this particular case, have you taken a look at why they were allowed to go out of county and who authorized the chase?
I have looked at that. I had 2 officers, a sergeant and a deputy, on administrative leave. Since that, we turned our investigation over to the state police to just, because there was a death that resulted as an officer involved incident, the requirement is an outside agency has to look into that. We still have not got a response from the state police or the Madison County. I believe it's Madison County that was reviewing that. However, the sergeant and the deputy were issued discipline in that investigation. And yes, I am reviewing the pursuit policy, and there will be changes made to our pursuit policy to clarify some of that.
Okay, is that sergeant still with the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office?
No, he is not.
Did he retire?
He did.
Did he say at the time during the pursuit that he only had a couple of days left and he authorized the pursuit?
That I'm aware of, but I don't know that if he said that or not. He did not say that to me.
I believe it might have been a recorded conversation.
Okay.
After that incident occurred, how many days later did he retire?
He just retired, I believe, in the last few days.
Okay, all right. That's all that I have at the moment.
Okay. Thank you. Susan?
Thank you.
It's on, I think. Yeah.
So a few different questions. One, you mentioned that there's a civilian who is part of the interview process. Who is that?
So currently, it is our finance guy at the county, a financial guy at the county. It is a county employee currently. Yep. And I do know he is not law enforcement. And I do want to add that my intent with that panel is to have a civilian from the public. We're just in the position that I haven't fully created that panel to the best of what it can be. But I wanted to try and do more than just an interview. Currently, it was just an interview with the sheriff. I wanted to try and make it a little bit more. So that's one of my works in progress, if you will.
So is it true at this point that any new hire must pass, you have to approve every new hire?
Well, the merit commission has to approve,
Not only you,
has to
but
put them on there. But once they're on the list, then yes, I have to offer them that employment.
is the sheriff's approval of any new hire a new feature of this policy, or has that been the case?
I think the sheriff's been able to approve new hires before.
Been able to, but not required to? I'm just curious about the responsibility of
Yeah.
whether or not the
Yeah.
sheriff has a not just discretion, but veto or approval, like
Oh, to say yes or no, they're not, they can.
yeah.
I mean, I would think that the sheriff has had that. I can't speak for what he did before me, but my understanding is, yeah, the sheriff would be able to say yes or no.
Like if you looked at this interview process and said, nope, too many red flags, the merit commission couldn't override your decision.
They can, so they're the ones that will make the determination if they go on a merit list.
Mm-hmm.
But once they're on the merit list, then it's the sheriff who, they can put them on the merit list, yes. But if there's too many, and if I still think there's too many red flags, then correct. As of right now, I could still say, no, I'm not hiring that person.
Thank you. That's helpful. One of the things I think is true is that there is a fairly high degree of overlap between officers who use excessive force and experience with domestic violence. Is that something that is included in the family or vital records portion of the background check?
So with the criminal history, they would have to list if there was any instances of domestic violence, or they should. But that is where we're hoping, by sending letters to the police agency, not just the state's attorney or the circuit clerk, because those would only be recorded if there was some kind of charging. But by sending to the police agency, we should get copies of any police reports where that person was listed of it with any involvement, so that where we could see those domestic violence incidents if they were documented.
If they were documented, right. Yeah. And then I think my last question is, how confident are you with the current process that you have managed to put in place since your appointment as sheriff, that this process would have eliminated Grayson from hire?
I think that the process that I have in place is a step in the right direction. I think that it still needs some work, like the interview panel that you just pointed out. I don't know if it would have prohibited him from being hired or not. I think I talked to Dr. Campion to explain the psychological exam to me, because when I was reviewing some, I saw that there was a notation on there that this report is good for 1 year, basically, is what they put on their psychological, or he does on his psychological. And what he described to me on that is, even the psychological exam is a snapshot of the right now of how a person is. So I don't have a great answer for you on that, but I'm trying to be as thorough. And like I said, I'm absolutely open for suggestions. Mr. Christian, I'd like to thank you for giving me that information that you did, because I did literally check that this week. So that just shows, right, the information that you might not get even when you're asking.
Would the multiple DUIs or the military discharge red flag a candidate for you?
I would look at the military discharge would, to me, I know this isn't the popular answer, but even more so than the DUIs, would cause concern for me, if I had that information to work with. I definitely would want to ask more questions and see what was involved if I had that initial information on that discharge. The DUIs, I think you have to look at the number and the time in between DUIs and the time since the last DUI, and try and figure out, 2 DUIs, isn't necessarily a deal breaker for me for an employee. We hire 50-year-old employees at the sheriff's office, and if they had 2 DUIs when they were 19, 20, 21, whatever the case may be, I'm not sure that 30 years later that would mean that he's the same person or she's the same person as they are then. But I would have to look at the whole picture and see.
It would be my hope that when you have tweaked this hiring process, that you would have a high degree of confidence that a person like Grayson would never be hired again by the sheriff's department.
Bob?
Just,
Is this working?
Yep.
to extend that a little further.
Doesn't sound like it. Pass that one down.
Just to extend that a little further, I guess the main focus in my head about this commission's work is to answer the question, is how did that guy get a gun and a badge and the authority that goes with the uniform of a Sangamon County Deputy Sheriff? And what I was asking you earlier, your answer about the manual, you said this gives explicit direction on how to do each step. My understanding from the press is that there were a lot of those steps that were missing in hiring Grayson. And it took the press to find it out and make it public. And so I guess I'm following up here just to say, and I also understand that Grayson was a lateral, so there might have been a little bit lax in following up on it. But there was some pretty hairy stuff that came out of the FOIAs that the press did. So I guess the question is, had his hire followed your guidelines, would it have caught those discrepancies?
If they'd followed these guidelines and they received military records that say whatever the reason for his discharge was and the DUIs, then the process, I mean, it would have caught that information here.
I guess what I'm asking is, you said earlier this will give you access to their personnel record. And a lot of stuff came out later other than 2 DUIs and the problem in the Army. There were some discipline problems, some questionable judgment, and that sort of thing. So and domestic violence. So I guess I'll ask it again. If your manual is followed closely, would those things have been captured?
Those should have been captured, yes, if
Okay.
this policy or this procedure is followed.
Okay. And so your much more explicit direction and requirements, those are new under you. Is that correct?
Yes.
So it would have stood a much better chance of uncovering Grayson. Is that accurate?
If this was followed, the information that you've talked about, there's a military check and the traffic and the DUI and going to employers should have been uncovered following the procedure that I've put in place.
Sunshine, and then Brian.
Thank you. I'm glad that you have fleshed this out some and that it would indeed capture the red flags that should have been seen for Grayson. But I just want to push it a bit more and find out if those are captured. It sounds like you're saying they should have been able to be seen, but I want to make sure that not only are they seen, but it prevents an officer from being able to get in the door. Because I know, like you gave the example of an officer who had DUIs, from several years ago, but like I'm co-chair of the law enforcement work group, and one of the things that we're talking about is putting a timeline on that, like two DUIs or one DUI within a certain time frame, so that it's not 30 years ago. Like, does that document that you have fleshed out have steps that would ensure that that officer is not getting in the door? Is what I'm trying to make sure, and I think that's what everybody was getting at. I just want to make that very clear that that's what we're asking.
Right. So the document is a way to gain that information, right? To get that information. One thing I didn't mention is we'll doing a driver abstract search through Secretary of State, which picks up even a little more than if someone got say they got a DUI, but it got pled to a reckless driving or something like that. The reckless driving is going to show up. The driver's abstract would actually show that there's a DUI. So this is going to, or should, if done correctly, right, it should get us that information, as much of that information. Again, I think it's important to reiterate that we can get these records, but when we're going to these police agencies, we're going to these employers, the information that we get, they have to be willing to provide it to us, right? That's why we have them sign the waiver, so that we can give them copies of the waiver to say, you're not going to be held liable. They can't come back and sue you for telling us this. They've given us that permission. But again, once we have that information, then it still will be incumbent upon us at the sheriff's office and the merit commission, if they say, no, you're not passing the background because you had a DUI 6 months ago, or they're saying, yes, you can pass because it was 6 years ago. It's not automatically something that's prohibiting hiring, but the felonies prohibit the hiring, right? If they don't have a FOID card, they can't be hired. But it's not like written in law, if you will, or county policy that they can't be hired with the things that you're talking about.
Okay, so just to be clear, he would still be able. There's nothing in there that says any of the things that came up in Grayson's background would prevent him from being how it's discretionary. So there's nothing that has been put in place that said 2 DUIs within this time frame are an absolute no, or anything, nothing like that. So it's still discretionary. So he could potentially be hired again.
Correct. There's no
Okay.
it's not written that those are disqualifiers.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful for our law enforcement work group.
Yes, ma'am.
Ryan. Oh, Bob, did you have a follow-up there?
Just a quick follow-up, but you're still telling us that had that manual been followed, the stuff other than the DUIs would have emerged on Grayson.
People supplied that information.
Well,
if there's like the domestic you're talking about, if there was a police
he
report, it should have emerged from there.
He was an applicant, so he would have had to have signed a waiver.
He would have had to sign a waiver, yes.
Yeah, okay,
Yep.
so the process would have permitted you to say either you're not going to sign the waiver, we're not going to hire you, or you
Correct.
sign the waiver and we're going to find out all this stuff. Okay.
Ryan?
Thanks for being here, Sheriff.
You're welcome.
Obviously, a huge part of what we're going to be looking into is how to flag and filter so that no commission like this ever has to get created, right? The other part I wanted to ask you is kind of on not necessarily filtering out the bad officers. How do we find the quality ones? On that note, who would you say we compete with the most? We being the county. Who would you say the county competes with the most? Quality officers.
Right. So we're competing with Springfield City.
That may not be the term you want, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it is
And
competing.
retaining too, I would say
Right,
too.
right. Currently, I mean, as of the last year, it's the city of Springfield.
Yeah. Then maybe the simple answer may be the city of Springfield again, but what are things that would help? Or I'm at least hoping that at the end of the day, this commission can also make recommendations on that.
Yep.
So I think one thing that the county is in need of is assistance with recruiting, better recruiting methods. I think that historically, the sheriff's office had always been a place that people went to. I mean, my experience as a city officer, we had people always leave the city to go work for the county. In the last year, that's switched. People are leaving the county to go work for the city. Whether that switch is just financial, what I don't know. I mean, there's a significant financial difference between the starting pay of a city officer compared to the county, a county deputy. There's more opportunities at the city, just with different specialty kind of stuff. So I'm not sure that we can compete with the difference in opportunities, but we need to become more comparable. I guess it's kind of a different mode of policing there, so it's kind of a hard say, but one thing I know that we are in need of at the sheriff's office is some improvement with our recruiting.
Thanks, Sheriff.
Kristen?
Hi,
Hi
thank
there.
you for being here. I know that we're talking a lot about hiring right now, but one of the major concerns that I have is that Grayson was hired by the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office, and there was multiple people hired by the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office. So what are we doing, or how are we identifying red flags within the department currently?
So that's a tough question. Obviously, once someone is hired, you have to have, I mean, the red flags could be complaints coming in. You have to rely heavily on each other self-reporting, right? The deputies reporting to their supervisors, the supervisors reporting up, so that we can recognize. And I think that there's probably a need for training of the deputies as to what red flags really are. Some people may think it's the obvious, an obvious use of force thing, but I think while that is, of course, a red flag, I think there's other personality traits that could signify more of a red flag that would cause us to need to keep a closer eye on certain deputies. But it really has to start internally, I think, to recognize those red flags. We have to build more accountability within the department as far as not being afraid or concerned that if you're, telling on your coworker that they're going to lose their job or whatever, they have to, really recognize the bigger picture of it and help us get to recognize it before it ends up in a situation like Grayson.
With the domestic violence example that Susan gave, would that be considered a red flag if any of the officers currently received a domestic violence case against them? And would there be some sort of review by your team or whatnot to see if they were still fit for service?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then for the public to make complaints, it seems like the Brady list is fairly hard to get on. If a judge or a prosecutor has to put you on, is there a public facing space where the community can go and make complaints?
No, so the Brady list is really about lying.
Okay.
So for the public to make complaints, generally they would call and talk to our chief deputy or to the professional standards division, and that's how the complaints come through the sheriff's office.
Mm-hmm. Is there follow-up, or is there, after so many complaints you get, what is the process for that?
Well, each complaint will be assigned and a case opened up, and then an investigator is required to talk to the person making the complaint if they so wish. Sometimes we'll get complaints where the person doesn't necessarily want to go quite that far, but they want us to be aware of it, at which point then administration can open a complaint against the deputy for it to be investigated further.
Okay, and this all stays internal in terms of
Yes.
the complaints. Okay. And then also one of the things that our work group, I'm with the community education for public health and safety work group. One thing that our work group has voiced multiple times is that, doing police work can be traumatic. Are there supports for officers who continue to experience traumatizing events, and how do you decide when somebody may need help, or is it all, what do I want to say? Is it all volunteer? Yes.
So the county does have an employee assistance program that they partner with through Memorial that is open for all employees to go to. So it can be voluntary. However, if there are some instances where we believe that it necessitates, then it can be mandated that they go. And that's set up through the human resources at the county. I would call human resources, or the employee, we would mandate them to contact human resources to get that set up. And then, it could be a condition of, if a complaint comes in, it could be kind of a condition of their punishment, if you will, that they have to do so many sessions with the employee assistants or be cleared from employee assistance. So there are some avenues that we can address some issues with our employees if we deem it necessary.
So one thing that we're also very interested in addressing is the stigma around mental health, especially within like first responders and police and whatnot. So yeah, that's very helpful information. That's all my questions for now.
Okay, Veronica, then Susan, then Calvin.
So right now you have a group of people that are reviewing files if you need to hire a candidate. What is the demographic of the people that are doing the background check and reviewing files in terms of sex, race, ethnicity?
So currently, I have two people that are doing background investigations. Both are white males. That's it. I have two. That's what I have.
Okay. Susan, and then Calvin, and then I think I'll ask a couple of questions, and then we'll get back to see if there's any final questions.
My spouse was a volunteer firefighter for 21 years in 2 different townships, and one of the things that I saw those crews doing was having to respond to some traumatic situations, some really difficult calls. And I was so deeply appreciative of the chiefs that recognized their crews needed some support and would call that in. And often it was most readily available from other people, from other fire, like, so the Green Bay fire crew would send crisis response teams to our rural township. Because we know that when someone has experienced trauma, that how that comes out, it can either be dealt with in healthy, constructive ways, or it can go sideways, and bad things happen as a result. So following on your question, this whole community was traumatized by the murder of Sonia Massey. Has your department addressed trauma amongst your officers? Because they are still armed and armored out here with the rest of us, and we are not. And I guess my concern is, if they aren't addressing their own psychological responses to that, then they may well be more dangerous for the rest of us.
I can only speak since I've been there, and I will say no, since I've been there, that I've not offered or provided any of the services such as you're talking about to the deputies.
Okay, Calvin.
Okay, to kind of follow up on that. So they're not mandated to get a psychological evaluation like maybe every year or every 6 months?
No.
Okay. I don't know. Maybe that's something that you should probably look into for it to change. And I say that because a lot of times when you look at officers who find themselves in handcuffs, they're talking about their job and their work and going to these critical incident scenes and so forth. And I've seen that in dozens of officer arrested reports. So, but okay. Also to kind of get back to the hiring process, how many deputies are you currently reviewing for hire?
There's currently, like, for deputy position right now.
Well, or we could do all across the street. Corrections deputy.
Well, let me start the easy way.
Okay.
So I know currently they're doing a background on one deputy.
Okay.
Court security officer, I believe there are 3 that they're doing backgrounds on. And then I believe they're working on 4 correction officer background packets. Because all 3 of those positions fall under the merit rules, so fall under the merit commission.
Okay. And did these review happen under your administration or Jack Campbell's administration?
These are under mine. So when I came in, I started everything with a blank slate.
Okay.
So if you were a lateral, you're going through the same process as a traditional. There's no 2 separate lists currently. So they take the written test, the physical agility, they do the background. Everything is exactly the same. So a lateral's benefit right now is simply that they may not have to go to the police academy. It depends on, that's a dependent question as well. And then if they meet the certain qualifications for lateral, they won't necessarily start at beginning deputy salary. So that's the only difference in laterals right now.
Okay. And I'm asking that because I know the hiring process, that's to capture the information that the media was able to get, that the public was able to get. But it's not a determining factor for if somebody like Sean Grayson could get hired. It's not in that policy at all. So with that being said, I would personally urge my fellow members on the law enforcement hiring, training, and wellness and cultural competency to go ahead and start pushing for a resolution about deputies who have a DUI background. And then let's get it to the county board, because as of right now, there's nothing in the policy that says you can't have 2 previous DUIs. So if we move it faster, then we can get that into the hiring process, because somebody like Sean Grayson could still get hired under this. This process is only just to capture the information. So, but thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So, yeah, okay. There's been a wealth of information here, and I think every work group has been represented and asked a question tonight. And I hope that this has been informative to all of the work groups, and I hope this, circles back to really bring the recommendations to the commission for some things to do. Actually, the good recommendations that have been made tonight, you don't have to wait for those to come from us, for sure. So I do appreciate, a lot of the things that were said. I wrote down several things here. Some of them have already been addressed, but I'd like to just reemphasize them as well. I was going to ask about some of the details of the psychological testing, and Reverend Phillips brought that up. And then Mr. Christian made the recommendation that perhaps there should be ongoing psychological testing or tests for well-being or trauma that might help. I think our commission and our work group would be interested in the details of that psychological testing. That would be helpful. Also, drug testing was mentioned in your slides. I'll mention a couple of aspects of that. I think we all know that over the past 4 decades, the use of anabolic steroids and performance-enhancing drugs has skyrocketed among athletes, bodybuilders, the gym culture, and in other places. And there is some indication that it also has among the police as well. And so I think Mr. Christian mentioned that testosterone was found, but clomiphene and a whole host of other things. And so I think, thinking about, what's in the drug testing, what's the array of things that are tested for, is that done periodically? Are there triggers for that to be done as well? And I know that when we met, we talked a little bit about testing for the anabolic steroids. I don't know if you want to make any comments about that, and then I'll go on.
So the random drug testing is allowed for the deputies. It's part of their contract. So we have to abide by the rules of their contract. So I can random test 11% of the deputies each quarter.
Okay,
So I have implemented random testing, which does include steroid testing.
good.
So we're working with a vendor, the process, but it's been approved by the county board for my pay and all of that, or for them to pay and everything. So we are on page with the random drug testing to include the steroid panel as well.
Great. That's good. Then the various kinds of training came up. I think nobody said this specifically, but a lot of the comments alluded to the importance of de-escalation training, and I think you'll probably hear more about that from some of our groups. We obviously mentioned the anti-racism training, and there's
Yes.
several mechanisms and things that could be recommended for that. And also the retention process, retaining process. I think you've given, some good indication of what you plan to do. But when there is formalization of programs, we'd certainly like to hear about that again.
Sure.
And regular periodic evaluation, annual evaluation, or whatever the interval might be, could be good as well. You were asked the question by Mr. Wesley, what's new, what's being done that's different. I think you alluded to some good things there. And was there anything else you wanted to say about that, or have you said everything that you wanted to?
I think that we've covered that.
I think we have.
Most
Is
of
there
the
anything?
highlights.
Is there anything new with the Merit Commission?
So the new thing with the Merit Commission is, I should say, I'm going to word it nicely, giving them the ability or making them part of the decision making on the pass and fail of the background. So I don't think they've had a say in that in the past, but that is a new thing that will be married into the Merit Commission rules.
Okay, good. So I'm going to ask each one of you if you have any last comments, any of the commissioners, or questions, and I'm just going to go down the rows. Susan, do you have any questions or comments any further?
I'm okay.
Okay, Kristen?
I guess one last question. Is there anything that you were hoping or you are hoping to see from the Massey Commission in particular?
Yeah, my hope is that you do bring ideas that I can implement to make not only the hiring process better, but the sheriff's office better. And I know that may sound kind of crazy, but there's always room for improvement. And I think one thing that has probably been missing, the sheriff's office, it's 900 square miles, and the majority of their patrol area is way far out at the county and not in the city of Springfield. But those donut holes are where we have the majority of our calls for service. So I think it's important to hear from, not just from our county, out county members, but from the people that I'm going to say live in the city, even though we know what I'm talking about, those donut holes. And I think that's something that needs improvement. I think those voices haven't necessarily been heard recently. And I think that will help us to be better deputies and have better response.
Veronica?
Part of policing is also gaining the trust of the community. So I wonder, as a new sheriff, you have activities planned, or what are you working on to gain the trust of the community that has been shattered?
Right. So I'll remind everybody that I've been there just about 3 months. And I have a DOJ investigation that I've gathered a bunch of information on that's kind of taken up my last month there. But in saying that, I have met with some community groups. We have a couple community activities that we've planned. We had a Cram the Cruiser food drive that just allowed the deputies to get out and do a food drive for some of the local pantries. This week, we're going to 2 different schools. We did kind of a Secret Santa thing, so we're going to go to 2 of the county schools, Jefferson and Laketown Elementary, and deliver some gifts to some kiddos there. As we move forward, my hope is again to not only me be able to meet with some of the community members and some of the groups, but to also be able to take some of my actual street deputies with me so that they get that opportunity to be involved and to hear what the concerns are in the community.
Bob, anything else?
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Calvin?
I know that we were talking about drug testing, and I know that you said that 11% each quarter is random for the Sangamon County Sheriff's deputies. But what are the criterias for the correction officers, because they've had in custody deaths as well as the courthouse security deputies,
So currently, it is not allowed in their contract,
to drug test at all?
only on initial hire. I cannot do random drug testing. I would have to have probable cause them to show up intoxicated, or if there was an incident, a shooting incident, something like that, then yes, they can be tested. But just random testing is only allowed in the working contracts of the street deputies.
Okay, what about, and I'm getting now to the correctional officers. What if there was a in custody death?
Then yes,
Okay.
yes.
Now, what if they were just listed as an assisting deputy and they were just there?
It would depend on their involvement, and
Okay.
obviously we would, with cameras, hopefully be able to know their involvement.
Okay. And then my other question is, as we are making these recommendations for changes to retainment policies and hiring processes, the police unions are very strong.
Mhm.
So what I'm wondering is that the recommendations that we are making, do you see them objecting to some of them? Or all of them?
So- So the hiring practices, they're not, until they're an employee
Mhm.
of the agency,
Okay.
they're not protected by
Okay.
the contract, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
So once they're like random drug testing for correctional officers, that will be something that we'll have to work into their contract. Fortunately, their contract is up, so we are in negotiations right now. So those are potential items that can be bargained for in
Okay.
negotiations.
So is there a deadline for the negotiations or their contracts to be finalized?
No, just, I mean, it's in negotiations until you agree to.
Okay, well, I guess we would just hope that they wouldn't finalize their contracts before our recommendations come out. So then that way we won't have them fighting us on this.
So the deputy contract is not up for negotiation until November of 25. So they have 1 year with their current
Okay.
contract. But again, they have, if you're referring just to the drug testing, they already have it in theirs. Court security is not included in that, and they fall under the patrol deputy contract. It's weird how it's written,
Okay.
but corrections is open. So again, current negotiations for them.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Jerry?
Yes, thank you. Thanks again for being here. As you are aware or may not be aware, but I am part of a critical incident stress debriefing team.
I'm aware.
Sangamon Valley one, been certified for over 7 years, and we've done numerous. Absolutely no charge. It's all volunteers. There's not only peers available at the time, but there are mental health professionals that go with us. So I'm telling you, we're available at any time.
Okay, I appreciate
let
that.
you know.
Thank you.
Sante?
Again, thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
So I pretty much have 2 questions. First and foremost, I hope I'm not being too personal when I ask this, but what is your position on the Safety Act?
I think there are parts of the Safety Act that are great and make huge strides for police officers. And I think some of them are pretty terribly written.
I also want to know, you said, if we make recommendations to you, it was my understanding that we would make recommendations from this committee to the Sangamon County Board, and I know we're experiencing a lot of resistance from the board. So I guess my question is, do can we come straight to you in regards to some of the issues or solutions that we would have for the Sangamon County Sheriff's Department, or do we go through the Sangamon County Board and get more resistance?
So I think that I'm not sure how you're structured as far as that goes. However, what I will tell you is that I'm happy to take your phone call anytime you would like to have a conversation. And it doesn't have to be a phone call. I mean, it could be an in-person, whatever you prefer. But I'm happy to listen to what your concerns or what your recommendations are and let you know my thoughts of it. We may not always agree, but at least I'll be able to tell you, here's why I think it won't work. Here's why I think it's good. I can't make that decision. I have to go to the county board, or, hey, I think that's great. I think I can go ahead and make that change. I mean,
Thank you for your transparency.
you're welcome.
Yeah, we'll make formal reports to the Sangamon County Board and recommendations to them, but we can make recommendations to other organizations too, and will. Ryan? Anything else? Okay, Sunshine?
I've got a couple things. I don't know if I even remember them all at this point. One was way back when Kristen was talking about the like anonymous reporting. I thought that the county had an anonymous reporting option for officers, but I don't know if that is the case for like the public. Is there an anonymous reporting option for the public?
Yes.
As well, so they don't have to call you, because I know you were saying like they could call you and you could do there is an anonymous reporting option as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then I know you mentioned that they have to have the FOID card, and like if they, in order to continue to be an officer, if I know there are several things that can cause a FOID card to be revoked. If any of those instances occur, and I don't know what all they are, but would that result in the officer being fired if they have their FOID card revoked?
So a FOID card can be suspended or revoked. Suspended can be like if someone has an order of protection against them, their FOID card gets suspended. They can say the person doesn't follow up or the order of protection gets dropped. They can then, I'll use the word, petition the state police to get their FOID card back so that the suspension doesn't hold per se. So then they would have their FOID card. Sometimes we may not know that that's happened, right? Because say, and I don't know if this is the case that you were referring to, because I think I was gone before that stuff happened there, but a domestic situation happens out of county, or it happens in the city and someone doesn't know that it's a county deputy, and we don't know that it has happened, or that someone's we're going to know that the OP gets issued if it's a Sangamon County, because we serve those. But if it's out of county, we may not know that that has happened. So when state police gets that notification, they generally mail some kind of letter to the police agency where that person resides to serve them with their notification that their FOID card has been suspended. But it may not always end up like in the case that I think that person lived in the county but worked for the city that you were referring to, or something like that. So it may be that the county got that person's suspension, FOID suspension letter, didn't recognize them as a city police officer. Who knows? But so would they be automatically terminated? No. They would probably be put on leave pending an investigation. Again, like Mr. Christian said, with contracts, we have certain discipline rules that we have to follow. So it wouldn't necessarily mean an immediate termination, but if their FOID card was revoked and they couldn't get it back, then they would end up being terminated.
Okay.
That was a very long way to answer that, and I apologize.
That's okay. Thank you. And also to the point about the negotiations, I know Calvin was saying, or Commissioner Christian was saying, that, you know, hopefully the negotiations wouldn't go through before we're able to make recommendations. But are you able to make, I don't know, like if you're allowed to make recommendations in your position, like, or does it have to come from like the union steward or
Like changes for
to the
changes for
contract?
the
Like if
contract.
yeah,
I am allowed to request that. Again, it's a negotiation.
right,
So,
of
yeah,
course.
so
So
I mean, there are things that if the union wants and the city or the county wants, then we're like, okay, you know, it's well, we can maybe give you this, but we want this in here.
right,
you know,
yeah, no,
kind of thing. But yeah,
I get how it
yeah,
works.
yeah, I can bring that.
Okay,
I can
if
bring things forward. Yes.
so, since you have already implemented random drug testing to the officers on your own, my assumption is that you would be supportive of that for the other positions that would be under the contract. So my suggestion would be for you to recommend that as part of the negotiations without waiting for this commission to um, you know, put that, since you're already in a position to work on the negotiations. So
Right.
I just, all that to say, like, don't wait for us if you can do it.
No, and it was already on my list. So and just to be clear, it was already in the deputy's contract. It just is not in the correction officer's
Right.
contract. So
Right.
yes, it was already sent to my team that of something, a negotiating item.
Okay. And also, can I ask if there are any, when, I don't know, whenever the contract will come to be, would it be possible for our commission to get like a summary of anything that's new, that's changed, or just so that we can know as we're making the recommendations, if, for example, it gets approved and they have to do the drug testing, as we're coming up with our recommendations, if that's already taken care of, we could potentially take that off of our focus. Would we be able to get something like that?
Sure. Once it, I'm not sure.
It might not, it might not happen.
It
Yep.
could be a year before.
Yep, I get it.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
if it
yeah.
is, I'd like to request that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think that's it for
You
me.
may have to remind me.
That's okay. I'll see you soon.
Yes, you will.
Do you have a central repository for all complaints, no matter where they come from, to be collated for individuals?
So
We worked on that,
Yeah.
actually.
So right now, everything of ours is manual files, right? We are in the process. We did just get approval to
Yep.
purchase a system that will kind of make that
That helps.
computerized so that we can access that information easier.
Joanne?
Hello? Okay.
There you go.
As you probably already know, my background was in discipline for the state police. And so a couple of questions. Does the county currently have in place an early warning system for deputies that might be showing signs of concerning behavior?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, I would recommend that, and we could come out of our
Sure.
law enforcement work group with this, or just now mentioning this to you right now.
Yes.
Something to think about. Also, an early warning system to capture concerning issues early. A discipline matrix. So if I violate a policy one time,
Mhm.
there's a matrix. Okay, you showed up, you missed coming to work one day. First offense equals this discipline. You do it twice equals this discipline. And the reason I say that is because oftentimes you will see in all police departments everywhere inconsistent discipline.
Right.
That is often related to the in-group bias, out-group bias.
Mhm.
The people that are on the inner circle, I'm late for work every day, but it's just a nod and a wink, and I'm sorry, I was late dropping off the kids, you know how it is. Okay, no issue. But then someone else does the same thing, and they get an oral, a written, or a day off, depending. So that discipline matrix protects the agency, keeps you out of issues with your union when you have a consistent application of discipline for everyone.
So there is a discipline step system in
Yes.
there, and it's built into the contract, into
Okay.
their contract.
Okay, great. And then lastly, something to think about is a peer support program. Going back to what Susan was saying, what Kristen was saying, when your officers experience trauma, you know, from all the years you've worked, we see things we can't unsee. And then we have to go home and take care of our families and come to work the next day and do whatever we do. And some of us are better at that than others. But then there is also a stigma, if you will, of wanting to show that you can cut it and it didn't bother you, but maybe it did. But sometimes we don't want to make that formal EAP, employee assistance call.
Right.
But we may talk to a peer support person and share with that person, you know, man, that really messed me up seeing that crash or responding to that injured kid or worse, right? And so something again to think about, peer support, state police has it, with members of the agency. It's not involving outside people. It shouldn't be an additional cost, but within the organization, just another person to kind of get some things off of our chest. It can remain confidential unless it's something that, now I've told you something that it violates law, violates policy. I'm giving you concerns about my safety or the safety of someone else, then all bets are off, right? But absent that, it could be a sounding board for an employee.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, one more, Sante?
Quick question. I know that you know, when I watched the video of my cousin getting murdered, I know that Deputy Grayson had someone with him. How is that deputy doing? I know he was brought back to active duty. It would seem to me like in a short time, and I'm just wondering how he's doing.
So he, I believe, went back active duty maybe the end of September. So it was shortly after I was appointed. He seems to be doing well. I did meet with him. He is one that, you know, a lot of what I'm relying on right now is my supervisors, right? To be my eyes when I can't be there, of course. And they report that he is doing well. I actually have a kind of a ticker on my calendar to check with him. I've just got it set on every 30 days, but just kind of to follow up or to try and make sure I'm at a squad meeting when he's there to get that opportunity to actually put eyes on him myself. But you're right. He struggled.
Susan?
Everybody that I know is accountable to somebody else. One of the conversations that this commission has been having and will be having with the county board is, how does the person occupying your office, how is that person held accountable? We've proposed a process that would allow a recall if a significant number of signatures were retained. Do you support the idea of having recall powers? And if not, what other ways do you see a community being able to hold a person elected to your office accountable? This is not a personal question, it's a process question.
I just want to hold it. So my understanding, if I'm understanding correctly, is that it's not legal, the recall, unless the state creates it. So whether that's true or not, I would tell you my personal opinion is that's what elections are for, is if if there's something happening that's you're not happy with, then you vote that person out or you vote a new person in, whatever. But I understand your concern that there has to be some way to hold someone in that position accountable. I don't have a solution for you. I mean, it would be easy for me to say the county board, they should answer to the county board, and the county board should have that say. But again, a lot of what is being followed is statutorial. So I'm not sure that, I know I have not an answer that the majority of the people aren't going to like, but I just don't have a great answer for you there.
Okay. Donna Massey, I'll call on you.
When are they gonna stop having administrative leave in cases like this? They know he did it. He's on camera. Why are they keep giving them a all expense paid vacation? That's a slap in the face, and they need to stop that. And that way, if they take away their livelihood, maybe they'll think twice before they pull the trigger. They need to stop administrative leave, paid administrative leave. It's a paid vacation. What an insult.
Any comment at all?
I just want to, again, thank you for the opportunity to be here and to talk to you. And again, please reach out to me if you'd like. I'm open for discussions from the commission.
And thank you so much. This has been very helpful, and we appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. Okay. Is there any new business that
I'm a member of the law enforcement work group. I was wondering if the sheriff would commit to coming and talk to our work group as well.
you can work that out with your commissioner?
I was just trying to get word of.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other new business now? No, seeing none. It's time for the public comment, and we'll begin that now. We asked that the speakers have signed up, and we've got 3 in order of presentation. This is a one-way comment opportunity. It's not a question and answer for the commissioners. Each speaker will be allowed to speak for 5 minutes and will be called in order that they signed up. Let's begin with the first speaker. That is Kaylee Freeman. Please come to this podium.
I don't talk to you. All right. Better start the timer. I spoke at one of the work groups. It's led by a lobbyist, which is interesting. I'm Kaylee. I've worked in healthcare since 2006. I've been a nurse since 2011, and I've lived in Springfield since 2013. And you know what haunts me every single day? An article that I read out of Missouri. Does anyone care about Sean Grayson's family? Quote, this question was proposed by a grandmother of a nurse in this county. A nurse, Isabel Butterfield, who works at Central Counties and continues to stand by a killer whose motives may or may not have been racial or appear to be. When I read this, I was not surprised. Scott Butterfield got Sean his job, and of course, racism and classism run through our healthcare system like water. Dr. Cruz, Memorial Medical Center, and everyone else in the medical district owe Springfield an apology for their actions during COVID-19. The day charges were pressed, I had local nurses reaching out to me saying, have grace and compassion for Isabel. These are the same nurses who think it's funny to say the N-word. The same nurses that will have patients admitted to psych for using AAVE, calling it psychosis or word salad. The same nurses who do not believe ACAB is a political belief, but instead a delusion. These same nurses judge their Black patients and treat them differently from white patients. But our healthcare systems reward this behavior. Isn't that right, Dr. Cruz? You should know about this since you're also on the board for Memorial. Memorial Medical Center has no one who is Black on their leadership team. The demographics of this community does not seem to be represented. I worked at Memorial from 2013 to 2020, and those incidences that I am describing happened. I was fired for asking Ed Curtis why his rich friends like you have special treatment when they come. Rich friends who during COVID-19 had visitors streaming through, while my disadvantaged populations had no one. The Springfield metro area has the highest income disparity between races of any metro area in the nation. I had patients who did not have, their families had no access to internet, iPads, or anything to speak to their loved ones, yet they could not have visitors. Ed Curtis's friends had plenty of visitors. The VIP treatment is common in healthcare, and for the 7 years I was at Memorial, it was given to lawmakers, lobbyists, donors, and doctors. Donors like Frank Valla. Frank Valla, who I brought up at the city meeting as well, has donated thousands to Republicans and Democrats both on our county board. The same people who sit on our county board and block every measure presented by this committee. It's strange that the rich seem to not only buy the best care while delaying care for those who are sicker, but also by politicians to ensure that special treatment continues while others suffer. It's also strange that Mr. Curtis donates, but I guess the rich protect the rich. Can't have changes that may allow poor people to have some power, like the power to recall our corrupt politicians. We also have to have cops on our mental health teams, according to Memorial, who is the largest mental health provider in our community. SIU has a 1.2 rating. SIU locked me up for 3 days for saying all cops are bad. I will verify. I'm a nurse. All nurses are bad. Systems built on oppression are bad. We also have cops on our despite 14 cities not having cops on their mental health teams, with great success. Our community has a history of police and public health care violence. It may be a good idea to not have cops on our mental health calls, but instead work with those in the community. Along with the modern day vast differences in wealth and power in the community, in central Illinois, historically, we have given no reason for Black residents to trust the healthcare system, with racism demonstrated by EMS when Earl Moore was murdered in cold blood by a for-profit ambulance company, Lifestar, which trains at SIU and Memorial. The same company that recently threatened to pull services from Jacksonville, Illinois, because they dislike market competition. We also have significant delays in our ambulance service in Sangamon County. The greed in central Illinois is killing us. Another insult to the Black community was the largest loss of life ever in the history of this town that occurred at the Carver Convalescent Home, an exclusively Black nursing home, where in the 1970s, 10 residents died due to a fire. This home was full of neglect, with bad wiring and other issues. Of course, the disrepair and suffering was caused by a white doctor and a white nurse who were allowed to join the medical society here, while Black physicians like Dr. Kenny Brew, who built a revolutionary hospital in Jacksonville, was barred. A hospital with lower death rates than others in the nation, until we as a community address our history honestly and stop propping up those who cause the harm we will never change.
Next speaker is Beth Langen.
It's working. All right. First of all, I want to thank all of you on the commission and the work groups for your work. What I know of what's going on in the work groups is a tremendous amount of work, and I wanted to say thank you. At your first meeting, there were questions about your position as an entity that was created by the county board and whether the county board has authority over the sheriff's office, and the degree to which the commission recommendations to the county board will require a response, both from the county board or from the sheriff's office. And there was discussion of how to obtain that clarification. I think it was mentioned possibly going to the attorney general to find it out. And I don't know whether that's been pursued or received. So I wanted to raise it because what I've seen is ambiguity as a thread that's run through so many things that have emerged. And I hope it won't be a thread that unravels your work. The sheriff's website, before and after Sheriff Campbell's resignation, claims that the sheriff takes policy and operation direction from no one. The Constitutional Sheriff's Organization is something I just learned of nationally. I guess about 10% of sheriffs belong to it. It's got ties to 3%ers who resist any federal government oversight. And this group doesn't believe that they report to anybody. And that just raised another level of concern for me about where ambiguity can lead. The county board's under position, as I understand it correctly, is that they aren't sure if they have the authority to advance the recall initiative. I don't know about authority, but I do know that they have power. They have the power to appoint current sheriff. They have the political power to determine, in large part with political parties, who runs for the office and who stays in the office. They have the power to determine its budget. According to the ABC investigation that came out in October, they had the power to authorize, I think, about 12 or 14 million dollars to, in effect, protect the previous sheriff by limiting public scrutiny of a rape by a deputy and several deaths that occurred under unusual circumstances in the jail. So one cannot help but wonder how much harm could have been prevented if more people had known more sooner. And I'm disheartened, frankly, that no price has yet been paid by anybody at the polls. Now, whether it be by the Illinois Attorney General or another entity, I'm really hoping that you have gotten or will get some clarity on whether the county board, if and when they accept your recommendations, can act on them themselves or compel the sheriff's office to act on them. Wherever, however it occurs, the outcome of your work and this process needs to be accountability and action, not ambiguity and not avoidance. Please do what you can now to prevent or to expose any ambiguity that can or will be used as an obstruction or as a distraction from the justice that has to come. And again, thank you for your work.
Thank you. Thomas Davis.
Thank you, Doctor. Let me respond to Mrs. Massey first. This paid administrative leave is a vacation. What we talked about, what the work group in the law enforcement talked about, was a reallocation, perhaps, of people who are on suspension. Let them pick up litter. Let them do something else. Let them go to training, for God's sakes. Also, psychological testing. We understand that military hires are very, very frequent. PTSD, which my son has, I should know that, is very, very common with veterans. So I would encourage the sheriff to include something specific in the psychological examination for veterans. They deserve better than what they're getting. Now, I've only got really one more thing to say, and I was a felony prosecutor for a while, several years. Brady doctrine is the key thing. It's Brady versus Maryland, 1963, and it basically obligates prosecutors to disclose favorable or exculpatory information, such as the problems with any given police witness, to the defendant to protect the defendant's rights. And Brady violations are often, taken up and on appeal, and convictions are returned to the trial court for these problems. These problems are prosecutorial discretion problems. The obligation is an ethical one as much as legal. Luckily, in Illinois, we have a very strong Brady doctrine program through the laws. So they have discretion. When they abuse it, there are problems. Let me talk now about the list. The Brady list? Google it. It's a for-profit service. Yeah. Yeah. And we understand that states attorneys and judges and people of that in those positions have the ability to suggest that somebody be included because they've lied in court. And lying in court will get your convictions overturned. You won't even get a conviction many times. So the list is for profit. It is expensive. It's a new thing. It wasn't there when I was a prosecutor in the previous millennium, but it's useful. But it's not the go-all, be-all, end-all. Okay, and there is a delisting process. So it's as good as it gets. But lying cops are the reason for the list and their impact on the system of justice. I keep looking over there. I've got a minute and a half, and I'm really basically done. I would like to end on some good news. The Department of Justice this month has issued 2 reports against police agencies in Worcester, Massachusetts, and Mount Vernon, New York. The Illinois Attorney General, and that reminds me, I had one more thing, also this month issued a report on Joliet. Pervasive, systemic misconduct. It's worth another Google. Lastly, the Attorney General, and I wanted to respond to the other commenters' concern about how to get information regarding the sheriff's office, the county board, the citizens. That's the triumphant here. Okay, I think well, I know it was me. I suggested that an attorney general's opinion could be solicited. That has to come from the state's attorney. And the state's attorney is not going to do that unless somebody asks them. So please ask. Thank you.
Thanks. Next is Evan Brown.
Hello, everyone. Hey, Commission, and sorry for speaking up there. I just wanted to.
Got it.
I got lots of questions, and since this isn't a Q&A, I figured I would just wait on those. The first thing I want to talk about is I talk about this. I drive Sunshine and Joanne crazy in our work group about the recruitment issue or the logic behind it. I think it's really you're pulling from the same pool of unqualified rural guys that we have here. You're not going to create new people. One thing, and what is the one thing you could do to even make it better is to raise the pay, right? And if this commission is a part of increasing police budgets, that would be an absolute disaster. So any way that they could get creative and cut some jobs and pay their officers more, I think that would be a good idea for the recruitment conversation. Another thing regarding the recall amendments, this entire thing is extremely politicized, and the sheriff's response in regard to the recall amendment that you believe it's illegal is misinformed. The Juris Doctor brought on by county Republicans, his main argument against the recall amendment was, oh, you could win the court. It was that the affected parties would sue, and that you may win the case, but you also may not, and that would you don't want to incur costs to taxpayers. We're already paying these rogue agencies with no accountability. We're already paying these officers paid leave. It's a disaster for taxpayers already. Just millions and millions in lawsuits that the taxpayer foots for officer misconduct. So that's a disaster there. And, we really, when we talk about rebuilding public trust, if it is a rogue agency with no accountability and you're against the only measure that's available, where do we go from here? So the simple thing would be to not politicize this, to not side with the county Republicans who are politicizing this, to be brave, to be bold, and to say, I support the recall amendment, and I need the county Republicans to support it as well. And I encourage the commission members, especially those of you that are Republican, if there are any, where are you at the elections committee meeting? Why am I there? I'm not a good public speaker. I have anxiety. I would love for you guys to come as commission members, Republicans, if any of you identify as that, to pressure your elected official, pressure your county board member, pressure Brad Miller, the elections committee chair, pressure Andy Van Meter, the county board chair, pressure these people to do what's right. Because politicizing this Sonia's death is a nightmare. It's a nightmare. Please commit to doing a tattoo review of your officers. Please commit to requiring therapy or psychiatric care when an officer is involved in a violent incident. I, myself, saw Deputy Farley a month or two after the incident, and you said that you check up on him every 30 days. You wouldn't be doing that if you didn't know that he was messed up. He's messed up. I saw it with my own 2 eyes. I'm a people person. I stood right in his face. Hey, man, I know who you are. How the hell are you working? You know what he said to me? It was my choice. That's ridiculous. Ridiculous. He's still out patrolling the same beat. Please commit to creating a publicly accessible database to monitor employees' misconduct issues. That's all I have. Thank you. Thanks.
The last public comment is from Margarita Fultz.
Good evening. First and foremost, a drunk driver did not kill Sonia Lene Massey. A person who had a pattern of psychopathy, personality disorder, apathy, and who lacked the cultural competence and humility training and critical intervention team training, walked in that room and murdered Sonia Lene Massey. Catching him on DUIs would not have prevented her early demise. Anti-bias training has been implemented in various law enforcement agencies across Illinois to address implicit biases that may contribute to police violence. Studies have shown mixed results regarding its efficacy. Does it work? Sometimes it does, sometimes it does not. For instance, a study of the University of Chicago found that while implicit bias training can temporarily reduce biases, its long-term impact on policing outcomes remains limited. Does it save lives? We need good efficacy, good effective training in order for it to work when a stressed out, possibly racist person with a personality disorder and a pattern of psychopathy and misogynistic person walks into a highly stressful situation. However, the Anti-Defamation League's Managing Implicit Bias program reported that over 92% of trained officers found the content useful, and 85% felt better equipped to manage implicit bias. These statistics suggest that while the training is beneficial, it may need to be part of a broader strategy to be truly effective, to save lives. It needs to be annual, in service, as Sheriff Crouch mentioned, mandated, as I have been beating a dead horse with the Let's Be and Chief Scarlett and former Chief or Sheriff Campbell and just whoever will hear. It needs to be mandated training. That 40 hours should be mandated training. It needs to incorporate some of the newer trainings offered by Let's Speak. Verbal judo, which trains officers to walk into a situation and really effectively de-escalate a situation when someone is in a crisis mindset. It needs to incorporate that bulletproof mindset that allows officers to have that skill set to monitor themselves, their heart rate, their level of anxiety in situations in which they might respond the wrong way. The tragic murder of Sonya Lene Massey by former Sheriff's Deputy Sean Grayson underscores the urgent need for comprehensive reforms in law enforcement hiring and training practices. Eliminating favoritism and nepotism in hiring practices is also crucial. These practices can lead to the selection of candidates based on personal connections rather than qualifications and suitability for the role. And I'll be quick and fast forward. This is my social justice piece. In Sangamon County's shadow, hearts heavily with pain, Aunt Donna, Malachi, Summer, in sorrow remain. Their tears fall like rain for a love torn apart by a system that failed to protect them from the start. They cry for a world where justice is blind, where Black, brown, and poor are not left behind. Community policing, a dream yet to be, to build trust, protect worth, and set spirits free. In their grief, a plea for change, they implore for lives to be valued, for peace to restore. May their voices be heard, their loss not in vain, and may they have a future where love and justice are sustained. For a future in which we always remember Sonya Lene Massey's name.
Thank you to all the speakers tonight. Before we finish tonight, I want to acknowledge someone that's been very instrumental in establishing this commission. Sarah Wojcicki Jimenez of Kind Consulting has worked tirelessly, and I mean tirelessly, with Rakisha Falan to build the infrastructure, the protocols, the tools, the system, everything that's been needed for these meetings to occur and for us to do the business that we've done in the way that we've done it. She did it with grace, even when the work was misunderstood and she was misunderstood and publicly challenged. Her engagement with this commission ends on December 31st, so this is the last meeting that she'll help us plan and facilitate. So Sarah, we thank you for everything you've done to pave the way and make this a successful commission. And it's been a pleasure. So we thank everybody for coming tonight. For those that are online, the next full commission meeting is scheduled for Monday, January 13th, here at the Bank of Springfield Center. Please watch masseycommission.com for more information about the meeting and work group sessions that are scheduled in January. You've already heard about some of those. So is there a motion to adjourn? A second? All in favor, aye? Have a good night, everyone.